Welcome, everyone. I'm Amy Seeley, president of Seeley Test Pros and Leap, helping students to succeed in all kinds of tests from 8th grade to grad school throughout Ohio.
And I'm Mike Bergen, president of Chariot Learning, helping students with test school and life based out of Rochester, New York.
Between the two of us today, we have over 60 years of experience at the highest levels of the test preparation and supplemental education industries.
We both love to talk and learn about the latest issues in education, testing, and admissions. So let's get down to tests and the rest. The fascinating topic we want to explore today is coaching for academic success. But first, let's meet our special guest, Scott Clyburn.
Scott Clyburn holds degrees from the University of Virginia and Yale University and is the founder and director of North Avenue Education, a premier test preparation and study skills firm based in Portland, Oregon. Scott has taught in both secondary and higher education and has been a professional tutor since 2005. He sees tutoring as an opportunity for any student to become a better learner. Scott is the author of the North Avenue Guide to Study Skills, which will be published this winter and licensable by tutors and orgs in 2026. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Scott, it's great to have you on the show. I'd say it's great to see you again. It's been a long time, but it hasn't been a long time. We just saw each other last week.
That's right.
The three of us. But it has been a long time since you've been on the show. You appeared with us in episode 97, and that was a long time ago. And we had a great conversation about test prep for students with accommodations, still relevant today.
Mm-hmm.
Presuming that even longtime listeners didn't memorize your bio from that appearance, can we start off by hearing a bit about your long history in education?
Yeah. So I started my career in education in graduate school. I started tutoring for the SAT and what we called educational therapy at that time, which has morphed into academic coaching and now study skills and executive function coaching. So I worked part-time as I was a graduate student. And then when I moved out to the West Coast, I landed in Portland, Oregon to adjunct at University of Portland. And I continued tutoring and ended up building a brand around a unique approach to education that we've now codified in our curricula for SAT, ACT, executive function coaching, and college application essays. So we do a lot of one-on-one and group instruction, but we also kind of more recently have started really kind of leaning into the curriculum licensing world and kind of sharing what we've built and that has worked really well internally with our students, with the world.
Which is interesting because for all of us, probably the amount of time we've worked with students, the students probably we saw years and years ago are not the same. So in education, right, having to really even update our thoughts about how we teach or how students learn, they're not the same today as they were probably when all of us launched our careers in education, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was a big impetus for us redoing or updating the North Avenue Guide to Study Skills, because we had to kind of add things about AI and other tech that students are contending with as they prepare for school, complete assignments, go to college, that kind of thing. And then we've also added an appendix for college students. So we've heard more and more that kids are kind of entering college or starting their freshman year of college without some of the core skills that we kind of assumed that they would acquire in high school. And so we've updated and expanded some of our lessons to be focused on that college population.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
So we're talking today about, like, obviously it's funny. I wonder when we each think about who we are or how we show up with our students, I'm curious, like the language we use, like instructor, tutor, teacher, coach, right? There are these various terms. And I know we want to talk a bit more specifically kind of about some of those. So a lot of people might think that teaching and coaching are the same things, but are they, Scott? Is there a difference between being a teacher and being a coach in an academic setting?
Yeah, I think there is a big difference. And to explain that difference, I'd like to maybe step back and start with what is executive functioning? How is the executive functioning set of skills that students are or are not developing? How is that playing in and impacting their academic preparedness for college? So executive functioning is essentially just refers to the brain's management system or command center. So this includes things like working memory, cognitive flexibility, and fanciest word of all, inhibitory control, which means being able to restrain your focus or your attention to one most important task and kind of block out other things that might be competing for your attention. There's also impulse control and being able to stay on task that ropes into that. So basically, our students these days, we're seeing a lag or maybe a delay in their development of executive function skills. And so that's why it's really important today more than ever to kind of adopt this coaching approach that pairs with and supplements teaching information in order for us to equip students with the skills that they need to go off to college. So teaching kind of transfers information to the student, whereas coaching really changes their behavior, helps them change their behavior, empowers them to change their behavior. So that's the core difference.
Yeah, I often see that the work that we might do as tutors covers a bit of both, in that we are teaching content, we are teaching strategies, we are coaching habits, we are coaching consistency. If you're in any way attacking both the domain and the technical aspects of performance, does that mean you're straddling both sides of the teacher coach divide?
Most of the time, yes. Yeah, most of the time, at least what I see from the work that our tutors and coaches are doing with our students is they're doing a little bit of both. They're kind of playing that coach role, especially at the beginning of the session, checking in, how have things gone this past week? What were your, big wins? What were your struggles and challenges? And then towards the end of the session, they might be shifting into that teaching persona and saying, okay, let's work on this one assignment together. I'm the math expert or I'm the science expert. So I'm going to help you kind of complete this assignment together. And then they'll zoom out again at the end and say, okay, what can we agree to do before I see you again? Right. I think the thing that is really helpful to keep in mind is with, the bounty of information on the internet available at our students' fingertips, students aren't lacking information really. Like, so the role of the teacher isn't just to give them this access to some information that they might not otherwise get, right? Because they can get it pretty much anywhere and anyhow these days. The goal of the coach is to kind of use that pedagogical expertise to package it in a way that is accessible to the student and to coach them to actually make the best kinds of decisions and judgments when they go and pursue their own academic work independently of that tutoring session.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. I think people feel more comfortable looking at coaching in a non-academic context, and they think about sports coaches and they think
Yeah.
about, performance coaches, directors, and things like that. But ultimately, it's the same thing in subject tutoring. It's the same thing in test
Mhm.
preparation, where the instruction of math concepts and grammar rules, that's part of it. But there's so much more that goes on in a one-to-one or small group environment that has to do with maintaining focus and commitment
Mhm.
and the ability to meet all your benchmarks and things like that.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I think there's like when you're talking about this teaching versus coaching, it makes me think about the knowledge we're trying to impart, but the coaching part is almost like the big picture, right? As
Mhm.
far as the metacognition, that a lot of
Mhm.
times I think that you can be so into the material that you
Mhm.
lose sight of there's a bigger picture. And sometimes I think in task prep, especially, I'll say when a parent says, "Oh, you taught my kid to be a better student," which I'm like, that's the best comment you can give me. But that wasn't my intention, right? Like my intention was to help you get a better test score. But I think this idea of the more students can learn about learning or how they learn or to be intentional about that learning is a skill then of course then that will transcend any academic situation that we may find ourselves in with our student, right?
Absolutely. I'm just going to tell you a little bit more concretely what kinds of conversation habits really help keep students the focus of the coaching session. Because a lot of people have jumped into coaching. It's everywhere these days. You can
It's a
have any
hot
kind of
term, coaching,
yeah,
right?
exactly. You can have all kinds of like marketing coach, business coach, life coach, etc. So I think there's this impression, at least I would imagine on parents' parts, that this is sort of ill-defined or undefined and vague. But in reality, there's a set of best practices and a playbook that you really have to abide by to get the most out of the coaching relationship with a student. And one of those is these conversation habits. So we really try to instill in our coaches to ask specific questions. We try to avoid why questions because that kind of puts the student on the spot. Like, why did you do this, or why did it go poorly? Instead, we try to get them to be reflective as an outsider on their own habits. So, like, what's happening here? Like when you missed this assignment or when you lost that paper that your teacher gave you, what do you think was happening with that? Or what was challenging? What was hard about this past week, right? It kind of tends to lower the defensiveness on the student's side. And then we also really try to listen and use silence strategically. Students often get talked at, nonstop by adults throughout their daily lives. And sometimes the coaching session or the tutoring session is one of the few times that they'll be able to share space with an adult who just sits and listens to them. And oftentimes they have very profound insights to share if they are given the space.
Yeah, it's a really important point that you make because anyone who has the impression that a coach is just going to descend upon some receptive party and
Mhm.
convey brilliance that will then manifest automatically doesn't understand how it works. Ultimately, a coach is only successful if the student is successful, which means the student is like everything needs to be focused on the student, learning, doing the work, getting better. And that's an active, not passive process.
Absolutely. Yeah, the best questions are the ones that return the ownership of the process, the learning process to the student, right? So it's not, again, we're not teaching you something that you could probably access on your own via a quick Google search. We're helping you reflect and make better decisions about how to be that better student in chemistry or SAT or whatever the subject is.
Yeah, that
Right.
makes
And being
perfect
there to like just help to facilitate that process, right? The things that they haven't thought about. It's interesting too, because in tests, there's a difference of academic tutoring, let's say in test prep. And we know that like test prep tutoring is very much geared to numbers, right? Like quantifying and seeing the numbers rise. I guess in academics, we could say, a better grade, right? Like that's a way to look at like whether there's improvement. So I'm wondering when we're talking about this idea of executive function skills and kind of training the student, how do we, there's not a quantification. So I'm wondering, is there a way that we can benchmark these types of executive function skills that we know can really help our students kind of, become better at learning?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're pretty intentional about trying to diagnose early on those skill gaps. So we benchmark across a few different core executive function domains, such as planning, task initiation, follow through, organization, and reflection. We use a student self-assessment for this purpose. It's actually accessible on our website for free. Students can download it and take it and get a results kind of snapshot that helps them understand what skills that they would really benefit from cultivating and developing. But it's really about sort of centering and platforming their experience of their own challenges. And then every activity in our curriculum is kind of tied to a specific skill. So it's not just, getting better grades in general. It's like, okay, let's work on task initiation this week, or let's work on planning and prioritization this week. And there are really specific ways that we're going to build that skill. The key question that we kind of keep coming back to is, could the student do this without me in the future? Like that's the goal, is like I'm cultivating an independent learner. And if I'm not doing that, if I'm just kind of tethering them to me as the sage on the stage, so to speak, they're not actually progressing in the program.
Well, I think that's one of the challenges about academic coaching is really the intent is changing behavior
Mhm.
to create success and independent success, right? And I'm not going to lie. I mean, in my experiences doing academic coaching over the last few years, is you get to a certain point where you're like, okay, Birdie, fly. Like now we've gone over these things. How are you incorporating it? And I think that is the hardest thing because it does come back to they have to be intentional and willing to make those changes. And change, as we know, is often hard, right?
And I think for any parent or educator who is wondering, is this coach that I'm recommending ethical? Does this coach have the best interests of students in mind? That impatience, not impatience, but let's just say eagerness to see students become independent, to as get rid of that tether and let them advance with what they've learned to a better, more productive life. That's the goal. And anybody that tries to set up this relationship where you have to meet your coach on a regular basis for an indefinite period of time, for as long as you're in school, for as long as you need the support. That just does not feel right to me.
Yeah, I agree. I think the goal is to work ourselves out of a job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, that said, it does take time, and students can only sort of devote a certain amount of headspace to this in addition to all the other competing demands that they have throughout the week. It's really hard to be, you know, self-reflective or to exercise metacognition. And so one of the ways that we really try to break it down for them and give them bite-sized chunks is to kind of tear off just a little habit change or tweak every week or every session where we say, okay, we're going to try to do this one thing differently this week. Let's make it small enough to be accomplished in 10 to 15 minutes a day.
You're talking about those atomic habits almost, right? Right? Like a
That's
little
right.
bit at a
Exactly.
time,
Yeah.
right?
So what would be an example when you're saying tear off like there's a giant hunk of habit and you're just taking out, here's a little piece. So what's like one bite-sized habit that you might, or somebody in a framework like this might suggest?
Yeah, I mean, one of the most obvious ones that comes up early on because we have a section on kind of using a planner or an agenda is actually writing down your homework. A lot of students just rely on the tech that they have access to through the school to remind them of due dates and deadlines. Um, and there's something really important about internalizing those assignments and those instructions by hand, right? And so we really recommend that all of our students buy a planner or an agenda if they're not given one by their school, and they practice writing down what's
We've
required
done
of
talks
them.
like making time visible, right? It's seeing it that
Yes.
can be so critical, right? To see it in front of you. And I sometimes wonder if kids want to avoid seeing it because if I don't see it, I don't have to confront it. Like there's that part of it
Mm,
too. Like I think there's a certain amount of psychology behind that, but certainly seeing it makes you realize like I don't have a lot of time. I'll have students do that. Like map out your week and show me where, and you
mhm.
can start to clear right away see you don't have a lot of time. So you have to make some really good decisions with those blocks of times that you do have some discretion over, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Time blocking is huge. Getting them to make it visible is one of the key things, I think, especially for kids with ADHD.
Now, not every student proceeds at the same pace. Not everybody adopts habits at the same, like, how do you manage that process?
Mm. Yeah, so we try to benchmark as often as possible. The self-assessment that I mentioned earlier is often taken a couple times throughout our program. So it's important to kind of go back to that original tool, that original diagnostic tool, just like in test prep. When you take a practice test, you benchmark your performance or your progress. Where's that SAT math score at today? We do the same thing in executive function coaching. So we want to make sure that the student is improving in their skills and we're focusing on the right set of skills, the right domain in our work. Yeah.
Do you think students are good at determining where their sort of weaknesses are, or do you feel like do they see that in themselves or not in the beginning? I'm curious.
Yeah, not usually at the beginning, but I think there's also this tendency to believe the parent or the teacher over the student in this world. And so our assessment is a self assessment. We really want the students to do it themselves, but we encourage them to sit with their parent and do it because both voices or both perspectives, both sets of observations are, you know, probably going to help approximate the truth. And they do get better, as we coach them and as they grow in their skills and awareness, we do see them getting more accurate in their own self assessment. Yeah.
But that's also the value of an experienced tutor and coach
Mm,
is the ability to recognize issues that don't come up in any kind of diagnostic or self-assessment, but in fact, interaction and the observation of work and output.
absolutely. Yeah. And sometimes students will be down on themselves saying, oh, I forgot to write down my homework assignments 2 days this week. Right. But something that they'll say is, but I realized it really, really quickly. Right. I realized the next day that I forgot to do it. It's like, okay, even if you didn't do it that one day, just remembering that you should be doing it is actually changing a habit or changing an approach. Right. And someone like the tutor who's the outside observer helping the student coming alongside them building that skill is going to be the one to help champion that and keep them encouraged.
Well, they do just creating awareness that like this is a
Mhm.
behavior that's going to help you be more successful. Sometimes you might forget, but if you know what the behaviors are, you have that like list of things, then you're always, they're always making their best attempt to make sure they're doing as many things as they can. It's always interesting to me to have these conversations about executive functioning skills because it matters for everybody, whether you're a student, whether you're young or you're older, such as ourselves. I listen to this all the time and realize how much even the executive functioning skills I might have had a few years ago that I let lag. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
that is really important. And like, I should do that more. You know, I wonder, Scott, like in terms of adults, how much can adults benefit from this kind of coaching model, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think the psychologist that we worked with to develop our program and our assessment coaches adults too. And
Mhm.
that's one of the things that she says is, I'll have parents or other educators or adults come and work with me and they'll say, oh, I should have used this. I could have used this 20 years ago, 25 years ago when I was in, you know, elementary school or middle school. And so, yeah, I think we all have a lot to grow there.
Yeah, Amy, I like how you mentioned that like you let certain skills lapse or, I look at it in this framework of habits, right?
Mhm.
When we allow good habits to be replaced with bad habits, we have to redo the work. We have to set
Yeah.
it up again, and that's always the challenge. So it's not as if you're gifted a skill that you'll carry with you your whole life unless you work to keep it.
Well, this idea of being impulsive, I see that in myself anymore. I jump to different things when what the research should be is no, you shouldn't be doing that. But I think I'm seeing in our world now, there's so many more things to distract us than would have existed 20 years ago. So I do think that's the key thing is also in this case, when you're a coach or a teacher, I can sympathize. I mean, I can empathize with my students because I'm vulnerable to very similar things as well, which I think is when we talk about being a coach or working with students, it's very important for us to sometimes recognize where we can be like our students, right?
For sure. Now, this distinction between tutoring and coaching makes a ton of sense. And I think anybody who works with learners in any capacity can see how you're doing both things, but maybe not every tutor sees the connection. Have you observed as tutors have tried to absorb this coaching framework? You've seen places where not everybody executes it or develops the habit as quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. When we, for instance, have a tutor who comes on as a test prep tutor or a subject tutor, and then we train them in the executive function coaching curriculum, one of the biggest pitfalls that I see is talking too much and trying to solve all the students' problems for them,
Yeah.
jumping in and fixing things instead of
Saving
really.
students from themselves, letting them off the hook.
Absolutely.
It's so hard for people to allow a little period of discomfort while a
Yeah.
student works through something hard.
Yeah. Yeah, or moving too fast and trying to kind of give them a bunch of things to work on, as opposed to isolating, really one skill or one habit change, because that's all that the student can really accomplish in a given, let's say, week or 2 week period. Yeah, or even over engineering a solution. Because as an adult, it's like, well, this is how I would build it. This is how I would set up the process. But it's like you're talking to a 15-year-old. You need to make it a little bit more attainable and accessible for them.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Listen, Scott, we could talk about this topic with you all day. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure.
If listeners would like to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, my direct email is scott.clyburn@northaveeducation.com. Feel free to email me there, or you can just find us at our website, northaveeducation.com, if you want to see more.
Awesome. We hope you enjoyed this discussion as much as we did. Be sure to join us for another fascinating topic and guest on the next Tests and the Rest.
Did you enjoy this episode as much as we did? Find expanded links and more for this and all of our episodes at our show page at testsandtherest.com. While you're there, be sure to explore everything the larger TestBright site has to offer, including real, expert, unbiased answers to the toughest admissions testing questions. Of course, we'd love for you to rate, review, and subscribe to Tests and the Rest on your favorite podcast platform. If there's a topic or guest you'd like us to feature, just let us know and spread the word.